baggage handcuffed to my wrist. I drag it everywhere I go. Sometimes I fight you with my fists, but if I knew which way was home, it's where I'd go.
I used on mine, I used like a lot of people you probably know. I used it's very varied from like very varied. Is that?
Sure. Quite varied.
It's quite varied. From like very hard rock to some jazz type stuff. That I used like Lenny White's with Chick Corea and Airto and Dave Sanborn and Michael Brecker.
Did you stretch out quite a bit, or is it?
Yeah.
No, that's far out.
Yeah. In fact, they like, you know, I used to get fired around these joints around here, you know, for playing instrumentals, you know, all the time.
Well, the band that we had was Crosstown Bus, as I said. We subsequently changed the name to American Standard, which was a name that we'd gotten off a urinal in a bathroom. It's a famous ceramic name. And anyway, the first gig we did was at a theater in southeast Denver. I don't recall the name of it, but it was a drama theater. They didn't usually have concerts, but this was a special thing that they'd done. There were 4 or 5 bands, and we were the headline band.
Was it the Guild?
It may well have been. It may well have been. And the other bands came on. We headlined. The other bands came on, and then we hit the stage. And I'll never forget it. It was like Beatlemania at this point when Tommy started playing. I mean, these kids just rushed the stage, you know. And it was very psychedelic. We were at the height of the psychedelia, you know. And there was, you know, there was stuff going all over the walls, and you know, I mean, it was bizarre. Incense was burning, and it was just weird, you know. But we knew right then what a special, gifted musician that we had encountered from that very first gig that we did with him, you know, because the whole reaction from the people, it was so evident, you know. They came at us, you know. They came at us. It was unbridled emotion.
Yeah, he did have a gift. He was very special. I mean, he really, really worked hard at what he did, but it was a natural thing for him. I mean, he tried to teach me to play guitar. I mean, it was hopeless, but he had a gift. I mean, which started, you know, very, very young, and he did have something very, very special. I mean, you can't pinpoint it, but I have never, and the musicians I have known since then, there is no one, you know, who compares as far as their knowledge. You know, I mean, there are some brilliant musicians, and you know, that technically are incredible, but he knew how to play everything: country, classical, jazz, rock, and he could play any of them brilliantly. You know, and I have yet to meet a musician like that.
His songs, I mean, on Private Eyes and Tears, are so amazing. I mean, they still live on, and they're still as strong now as they were 13, 14 years ago. If you just listen to his lyrics, and the way he portrays his melodies, and it's just the way, the whole thing about Tommy and his music was very, very special, if you're an emotional listener or player. And I think it's great that a lot of young kids can now tune into Tommy and learn from one of the masters of guitar.
That whole concept of being experimental, you know, and trying, I mean, there's nights where I can remember vividly being in the middle of a song energy. Playing at Talagi's, for instance, is where it comes to mind most of all. And just kind of, you know, being aware of him over there noodling while I'm trying to do what I'm doing, you know, and he's doing things, and I'd have to just stop singing and turn around and smile, because you'd heard him try to attempt it several times before, maybe other nights when we were playing, and it didn't quite work. And then all of a sudden, you know, that echoplex and the feedback and the reverb would all be what he was trying to get to, and it'd be there, and you couldn't do anything but smile, because that was it.
Well, he just had the echoplex, as you know, which now is pretty, you know, run down as far as the new electronics are concerned. But Tommy didn't actually use it as an effect. He played the echoplex. As you know, he had the stand in front of him, and he used to jam that thing over and create some amazing sounds. I couldn't believe it.
I think it's different for everybody. You know, like with me, his music, his ability to play the guitar, that's my first hand of Tommy was never his singing, it was never his writing, because when we were growing up together, he didn't do much of either one. And as he started singing, me being a musician, I always followed his music out of a lot more than his lyrics. A lot of people really love his voice, his lyrics, on top of what his music, you know, is all about. And that's, so a lot of people take it a lot of different ways. I mean, a lot of people love Quadrant 4, a lot of people love stuff he did with Billy Cobham, a lot of people love Sweet Burgundy. There's so many sides of Tommy that he's just a wide spectrum of musical talent there.
Well, my first impression of Tommy Bolin was not with Mahavishnu, but was with a band called Dreams, where we were performing. I heard him first at a speedway in West Virginia, and he was in the band called Zephyr. It sounded really, really good to me, and very pleasant presentation, you know. And again, playing within a very complex musical environment for myself, and working with the guys I was working with in Dreams, we came across, when we'd come across a rock and roll band that made us stop and turn our heads, it was like, okay, this is unique. What was unique about Tommy is that he played the spaces so well. He played very tastefully. He played very, very good notes, the notes that stay. He didn't play a lot of notes, played the right notes. It's uncanny, not expected. It sets off a lot of, there are very few guitarists in the rock and roll idiom who do that, and those who do have a lot of longevity in music, whether they're dead or alive.
Tommy I love because he's a very soulful person. He had a lot of rock in him, but he had a lot of sensitivity too. He was always kind and kind of laid back and played with a vengeance. And I made the teaser record with him in Jimi Hendrix's studio, Electric Ladyland Studios in Greenwich Village. And he liked me so much, he asked me to go on tour with him. So it was myself and Reggie McBride on bass, Norma Jean on sax, and Mark Stern from Vanilla Fudge in Oregon, and Tommy. We had a very hot band. But all I know is that when we came together, man, it was like an explosion. Billy Cobham and George Duke came and saw us play one night, and Billy said to me, "You're playing so hard, you're knocking the paint off your drums, man." That's how hard we actually played together. And I liked him because he understood blues and rock, and he was also like dabbling with like fusionary themes. So for me, it was more on the rock side going fusion, as opposed to with John McLaughlin was all fusion. With Tommy gave me a chance just to be funky, like a raw dog, and I loved him for that. I want you to lay right back down and just
I think he was the most generous musician I ever met, and all he ever asked from his players was simply to play from the heart, and he wouldn't demand anything but that. If you didn't give him that, Tommy would, he'd recoil. But if a player gave him that, that's all he asked, and I don't know, that's the definition of generosity for a musician. Oh man, Tommy was incredible for me. Every time he ever introduced me or any other musician, he introduced us as total equals. And I felt a little bit embarrassed about that, but I would play along sometimes and say, "Oh, okay, yeah, hi, it's nice to meet you." But he took me along on his coattails, as far as I'm concerned, and made me the player that whatever that was, to become. I owe most or all to Tommy.
Well, he seemed to have a degree of adventure. You know, he was looking to kind of erase some of the boundaries of pop music. Maybe not erase, but let's say blur the boundaries a little more. And that was very interesting to me at the time. I was starting to listen to a lot of jazz music at the time, and I was starting to, you know, work on a lot of different techniques, and listening to a lot of different kinds of music. And he happened to be in that same frame of mind, even more so because he was writing. I had not started really writing any original compositions at that time, but he was, and it was interesting to me to hear what he was writing. It was like he was taking elements of lots of different musical genres and just putting them together and making, you know, some different music, you know, not relying on formulas, so to speak. And so there was a sense of adventure in that, and that, I think that was really good for the band too, because the band felt like, you know, they were playing some, you know, newer kind of stuff. It wasn't just straight pop. It wasn't, and it definitely wasn't jazz or anything like that. It hinted at fusion, and in some cases even more than hinted at fusion. You know, he was into experimenting, and that was, I think, enlightening for anybody that worked for him. You know.
The Frampton thing had a lot of great chemistry. That's undeniable. The band had chemistry, but as Jeff said, I don't think I ever felt chemistry like I felt in Energy and that group of people. It just was never equaled. I remember sitting in the room with Frampton one night after the live album had been released, and Peter was drinking champagne, and we were all alone, just the four of us, and Peter said, "Hey, here's to the best band I've ever been in." And I sat there, and I said, I didn't say anything. I didn't say a word. I sipped the champagne and just put it down. I couldn't look him in the eye, and that was it. I don't want to take anything away from Peter and the band, because that was a great band too, but Tommy was from another world, as far as another musical world.
Energy was probably his favorite band. I really do. I know the last band, the Tommy Bolin band, was a real, you know, he loved that very much. But I think this was probably his favorite band, simply because Tommy was so jazz influenced. I mean, he listened to jazz constantly. I mean, he knew who everyone was. We used to go see anyone who came into town and play. He loved everyone. But because Energy was so jazz influenced, and I think that he was able to spread his wings in that band, and not with Purple, not with James Gang, not with Zephyr. He wasn't able to do that at all. He was always following the lines of an established band. And with Zephyr, with Energy, excuse me, he was able to really spread his wings and play progressive music. You know, I think he loved that, and that's why he shunned all the notices, didn't care that there were only a few people in the clubs, because he was doing what he wanted to do. But unfortunately, no one was coming to hear them, and they weren't making any money. I mean, he had an incredible following, and people loved him, and all the jazz musicians who heard him just loved him. I mean, he was the ultimate musician's musician, because he could play with anyone, any kind of music. But Energy was just, I think, another growth period, another, you know, time to be progressive. But the frustrations came with the fact that they were not mainstream. They were not making any money. They weren't being heard by anyone. But he was doing what he wanted. I think that's what he loved the most.
It's hard to describe because I feel bound by the, you know, the titles that we have to use. I feel like they kind of diminish what we were actually doing. Now you must remember that basically what we were was a blues-based bar band opening up at Tulagi's for, you know, John Lee Hooker or, you know, B.B. King or whoever might be coming through, Albert King, Big Mama Thornton. We'd come out and play a set, then that artist would come out and we'd back them up, you know. That was the essence of what we did. But musically, when we did our set, or when we were playing on our own, not opening for somebody, what we did was heavy metal jazz fusion, I would say. Now, there really wasn't a heavy metal then. We were loud. We were unbelievably loud. Tommy played through 2 or 3 100-watt Marshall amps, you know, and the rest of the band did their best to stay up with him, you know, volume-wise. So on that level, we were very heavy and cutting edge. But there was a jazz element because all the players were much more musical than a typical rock musician would be. You know, the keyboardist, the bass player, they all had jazz roots. And there was a time in early Energy when Jeremy Steig, the flautist from New York, had come down, and we played with him. That's where the name Energy came from. Jeremy Steig had an album called Energy, and that's where we got the name. So we were experimenting with that kind of music, and how do you make that work in a rock and roll framework, you know? And that's where it all kind of came from. But there were no boundaries for us. I mean, if we wanted to play, if Tommy wanted to whip out his steel guitar and we wanted to play a straight-ahead Hank Williams type country song, we'd do it. If we wanted to play polka music, we'd do it, because we love just goofing musically with each other.
I was amazed at what these guys were doing. I had come from playing cover songs in a really mediocre band, you know, out of Lawrence, Kansas. Never played anything original at all. And what these guys were doing was so left field and so amazing that I knew, you know, I was in for a real learning experience, and just hoped and prayed that they would tolerate my level of playing and give me a chance to develop it. And literally, I was terrified because I knew I was down here. These guys were up here, man. It was great, absolutely. You know, you just had to plug in and go. There was no, you know, there was no discussion. Just, hey, man, here it is. Here's the chord. Here's the riff, and go for it.
You know, we were in little vans on winter nights going to clubs that didn't, where the club owners didn't like us in the first place, and a lot of times the audience didn't understand us, and they were there to get drunk and have a good time, and we were there to just try and peel their ears off musically, you know. So there was, you know, I can remember being in the back of a Ryder rent-a-truck driving from Denver to Sioux City, Iowa in the dead of the winter, and of course there was 5 of us in the band and 2 roadies. Well, in the front of a rent-a-truck, there's only room for 3 people. And the rest of us were in the back of the truck, locked in with the musical equipment in the dead of winter, in the dark, with no heat, you know. And, I mean, you know, that's not a pretty way to spend an evening. I've had better evenings, you know. But it was all worth it, because when we'd go and we'd open for a 10 Years After or a Jethro Tull or a Who or whoever it might be, they would give us the respect, you know, to have the guitar player from, is it Alvin Lee? Alvin Lee from 10 Years After come back and say, you guys were unbelievable, you know. I mean, that made it worthwhile, because we never failed to impress the musicians.
Take the train today and don't look back again. Live the dreams you had, don't dwell on what has been. brighter days ahead. Any sad farewell words better left unsaid. Dreamer, I know what you're thinking. I can't see it in your face. Maybe before you were happy, but now your thoughts aren't of this place. Evening rain always feels the same at night. Evening rain always feels the same at night.
Around singing.
The basic start with just, you know, like the instrumental, just basic start with themes, and then I just let the players, you know, are, you know, I just let them blow their cookies for a little while, and then we go back to the theme. Well, mine's on Emperor, which is a off branch from Atlantic, and Purples is on Purple Records, which is an off branch of Warner's, so I'm on 2 record labels.
When Joe Walsh called him and said, I've recommended you to replace me and the James Gang, that was a thrilling experience for him. And of course, we all said, you must do it. You must. You know, it's a great opportunity. And he realized that too. You know, he knew that we were floundering here and we weren't making the steps that we needed to make. We'd had this opportunity to get a recording contract. It hadn't happened. You know, we weren't really expanding our base of fans. And this was a godsend, really, you know, the James Gang opportunity, because it really forced us to write consistently together, and it gave him the opportunity to get out there and be challenged on a nightly basis in front of big crowds of people. And that was good, you know. And then the Billy Cobham thing came along, and that was even better. It added musical credibility to him as an artist. And then the Deep Purple thing was not quite the same. The Deep Purple was, I'm cashing in, I'm going to get some money, and then I'm going to be able to do what I want to do. You know, he was working on solo albums and things like that. He knew that joining Deep Purple could be either a great success or a dismal failure. You know, he spent his whole career stepping in and filling the shoes of some awfully big musicians, you know, and it takes a great musician to be able to do that. You know, a mediocre musician can't go and fill in for great other musicians and do it well. And Tommy did that.
You know, it was just going to do an album in New York at first. This is what we thought. You know, he couldn't believe Billy Cobham was calling him up and wanting him to come play on an album. He just couldn't believe it. But the chance to go to New York and play with jazz musicians of that caliber was just mind-boggling. And the opportunity was just phenomenal because the eventual outcome was brilliant. It was just brilliant. I mean, I cannot believe, you know, today how that album sounds and what he did on that album. But it didn't surprise me because this was a format, a chance for him to suddenly do what he loved and to play on something like this. Did he shine? Because he just thought to himself, well, you know, maybe they just want me to lay back and, you know, play a few licks. He had no idea they were going to let him play as much as he did, you know, with that many musicians. But he was the guitar player, and he, you know, he showed them, and they just were blown away. And I think that, you know, it was just a nice time between the James Gang and Energy.
was a professional situation. We were brought together by Jan Hammer at the time to make the record as a recommendation from Jan that Tommy would be the right one. And I said, yeah, you're right. You know, for what I have in mind, for certain things, it would work fine. I need that kind of sound. It was just a question of calling and saying, hey, man, you know, I'd seen him with the orchestra in Boulder, Colorado, when we played concerts out there. And we'd hang out for a little bit and talk. Conversations that I do not remember because they were not, you know, anything more than how you're doing or what you're doing, let's have something to eat, or, you know, generally things like that. His dimension was in his playing, otherwise he was an everyday person like me and you know. And he did, what he did better than anybody else could do, because it was only what he could do. You know? And that was the thing that I remember very much about him. After the record, I didn't get a chance to talk to him very much. He went on to tremendous successes very quickly, and maybe getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I suspect that that was his downfall.
Well, I captured Tommy after the first rehearsal. I demanded he move in with me. We spent a good 6 weeks together at my house, playing a lot of Purple things we had to learn, but also what I would consider, and a lot of my friends and peers would consider, we were going to do something together eventually. Tommy and I were going to do a band thing. It was spoke about a lot. We were starting to write some songs together. He was helping me with my solo projects. I was, at one point, sort of listening to what he was doing for the Teaser project, and I was going to sing at least 2 or 3 songs on the record. But for reasons against the powers that be, I couldn't do it at the time. For contractual things and tax reasons, I did sing a little bit on Dreamer, the song Dreamer, if you listen to the end of it. I'd love to have sang more with him. I mean, Tommy was such a special person to me. If he would have still been with us, we probably would have been playing together.
But he always had these stars in his eyes that, wow, you know, if I could be like, you know, so-and-so and travel like that. I mean, and when he did it with Purple, it was like he was now one of these people. He was now on the superstar status. And some people handle it well and some people don't. He didn't handle it well. I mean, he was a cocky little guy who could, you know, outsmart most people, but he still had that innocent little Midwestern quality about him that didn't know how to deal with the big boys. You know, he didn't know how to handle himself on a superstar status, surrounded by these people who were very used to it. And I think that was damaging. That is very damaging when everyone around you wants to give you things, thinks it's an honor to give you drugs and get you high. And he was surrounded by this whirlwind of, you know, money and drugs and attention that it just engulfed him. It engulfed me. It was scary. As much as I tried to protect him, I could only to a certain extent. People were always grabbing for his attention and his time, and he was such a nice person. He would hang out with anyone. I mean, anybody who came up to him and said he was a fan. You know, he was a very poor judge of character. He'd hang out with people who just said, you know, come on, let's party. And that was painful to him. I mean, that was hurtful to him, painful to me, because I used to see him hang out with characters that just he shouldn't have. So in effect, you're right. I mean, and yes, to your question, because being in that environment, being thrown in that situation where everyone around you was clawing at you for your time and attention, he was a victim of all that. He didn't deal with it well. It sucked him up and hurt him eventually.
Your tongue's as sharp as a
Bottom Line for me, there's a club in New York called the Bottom Line. And I love that club because whenever I go there, it's like the highest shows for me. For some reason in that club, it's got the magic. I don't know what it is, but it's just in there. The spirit is strong in there. And when we went to play with Tommy there, Tommy was having a rough night in the sense that, you know, whatever he had done or whatever, he was just unable to really be himself. He had to like lean against the pillar and play. And I really felt sad. It really saddened me, and I felt like I had come to the end of my rope with that group at that time. Not because I didn't love Tommy, because I felt like it wasn't progressing for me anymore. Because, you know, you got to know, I mean, I was coming from the space of like being a disciple of Cheech and Moy, being very clear, very one-pointed. I had worked with John McLaughlin all those years, and so, I mean, I was like really a high soul, wanting to play high music. And Tommy, I knew, wanted to do the same, but for whatever reason, they had bad habits. Bad habits, so I just knew my time was up with that band.
Where were you, and what was going on when you heard that Tommy had died?
I was in my home in England, and with Karen, of course, so we all know Karen is. And I had the call, and it was, I just couldn't believe it, you know. And we both were in incredible shock. And the next day we flew to Sioux City, immediately flew there to be with his family and his friends, and just to be near him. Like, just a tremendous shock. Took me a long time to even deal with it.
Does that emotion still come back sometimes?
Absolutely. A lot.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
13 years,
yeah.
And it can be like yesterday.
Absolutely.
That I had been asked by management at one point when Tommy was living in LA, I was told that he had a drug problem, and would I please go out and try and help him. And quite frankly, at that time, I was in no position to help him because I was about the same way. But I did go out there, and I knew that there was a big drug problem. You know, that Tommy was a very wonderful, open, kind, and loving person, but had a disease, you know, and it was taking a hold of him, and there's no question about it. And it was obvious to see there, but there's nothing I could do about it. You know, the only thing I could do is something about me, and you know, so I knew there was a problem there. And when I did get the news, I was shocked, you know, because I always had this feeling, you know, when you're young, you have a feeling that you're invincible, and we all shared that feeling, and we all abused ourselves, you know, and some of us lived and some of us died. And I can remember that, you know, a complete feeling of hopelessness when I got the news, because I loved the guy as a brother, you know, and problems or no problems, you love somebody and you share a musical situation with them, a simpatico, that's special, and you're not going to have that again very easily. So it was a feeling of helplessness, and I can remember calling my father up, who lived in town, and asking him to come and get me, and we went to the park, and I just cried, you know, because there's nothing else I could do, you know. And I was angry, of course, you know, because you're always angry at somebody that kills themselves, you know, because it's like they're doing it to you, not that they were doing it to them. But that's not true, you know. And that's all it was, is, you know, it was a feeling of helplessness and a sense of great loss, that somebody that was a gifted musician had died because of drugs, you know, and alcohol. And there was a time that I would have said that this, you know, I would have avoided that question if it was drugs and alcohol, but there's no question about it.
You left me lonely, you left me blue, you left me weeping, I felt so cold for you, but you walked out and left my life so low. I just keep praying for help to carry my load. Somebody help me, I kept it coming, that sound. Somebody help me, my knees are falling to the ground. But nobody helped me, no, they said it's no good. Yeah, nobody helped me, you know, 'cause nobody would. I'm starting to wonder, what's the reason why you're gonna let me die? I said I went to the doctor. Doc says, what's yours ill? I got a bad ache, doctor, about to run to the mill. The doctor said, don't worry, I got some things for you. It's made up of whiskey, wine, and cattail brew. Now I don't want to want it.
People are calling all the time. I remember there was an incident where a guy called, who now comes every year from Wales. He called from Sioux City Airport and said, would we come and pick him up? And I said, well, who are you? And he says, I'm Carl. Your dad invited me over last year. I finally made it here. And I said, well, my dad's not, he had passed away, you know, by then, within that year. So I went and picked him up, and he stayed for 2 weeks. I had no idea who he was, and my dad had talked to him and set this up and passed away before, you know, he had a chance to pick him up at the airport. But, you know, he could have came over here and we could have moved for all he knew, but he took the chance, and that was one of the stories. And he invited a guy over from Sweden, which were Swedish. He stayed at the house for a couple days. The president of Tommy's fan club, 2 years after he passed away, came over. She stayed for a couple weeks. You know, they were all welcome. Our doors always was open at that time for, since then we've shut it, but got a little baby boy now, and we can't have, you know, all these strangers coming in from all over the place. But yeah, we get calls all the time still, because I'm in the phone book, by the way. So feel free. I'll talk to you, or somebody that's there will. You know, it's about time that something like this, with the help of Mike Drum and Barry Simons, is coming about for the people out there, and they're getting a first generation music package that they won't get elsewhere. You know, it's just a beautiful idea, and it's all came together, and it's remarkable.
It's not going to go away, and people are going to keep being inspired by it, you know, myself included, and that he was such a powerful force in the music business and little recognized by a lot of people. I think it'll be nice to see that change over the years, because I feel that it probably will surge and grow somewhat. Let's hope so, because he deserves it.
I think it's definitely time, because to preserve the memory of the music, you know, I had very mixed feelings when the archival stuff began to be looked at as a possibility of putting together anthologies and so on and so forth. And now I'm convinced that it's absolutely the right thing to do, because there's moments of brilliance on these records that people will appreciate, especially the people that liked his music in the first place. You know, the acoustic version of Teaser is radically different from what made it to the album. And I think it's very interesting, you know, that he was playing and always trying to reinvent things. And it speaks well when you hear these rare pieces, these unissued pieces. There was a lot going on, and there's a lot to hear.
I really hate to say this because I can't wait to get back to Sioux City, so I just lay down on my bed and think of what just happened. Because I hadn't seen the CD till I got to the gig that night, and I still haven't read it. And it's just like I said earlier, it's just like a Christmas present that's there under the tree, and you're waiting, you know, to open it because you know it's going to be your favorite present of all times. And I think this is the best Christmas present I could ever have. Month late, but.
His baggage handcuffed to my wrists. I drag it everywhere I go. Sometimes I fight here with my fists. If I knew which way was home, it's where I'd go. If I knew which way was home. Hey, Porter, come and cut me loose. But bring my whiskey and my water. Sometimes I get the blues, but I know I shouldn't order. That's where I'd go. If I knew which way was home. Run down Ghost Trail, no chance for love, no sign of life. Just wild dogs howling in the night. It's alright. Hey, Porter, come and set me free. I'm sick of my own company. Sometimes I miss the goal. Most times I miss my home. It's where I'd go. If I knew which way was home. Run down Ghost Trail, no chance for love, no sign of life. Just wild dogs howling in the night. That's what I like. Run down Ghost Trail, no chance for love, no sign of life. Just wild dogs howling in the night. Run down Ghost Trail, no chance for love, no sign of life. Just wild dogs howling in the night. Howling in the night.
Well, I hadn't heard him probably in, what, 22 years or something like that until you played him for me. The first reaction was, wow, I forgot we were so goddamn good. And the second was tug at my heart, you know. Just a real nostalgic feeling. That's about all I can say about that.
I feel it every day, so you can't tell me it's not an active part of the universe. I feel him around every day, and I think the guys would say the same thing, probably. In one way or another, he's here, he's with us, and he'll continue to be. He was too powerful a force not to remain.